Mind control has kind of a sliding scale where you've got the total robotic mind control on one side, and you've got mind control that's proliferating, such as in occultism in this country, or global education 2000, where children are losing their freedom of thought and their ability to critically analyze. There's so many different aspects of society that are affected by mind control in varying degrees. It's imperative that this information get out. And as I explained, my victimization, it certainly can be applied to all different facets of mind control and mind manipulation. And as Mark and I have heard so many times from people who have read the book and heard us speak out, that this is a thread that's tying things together. All of a sudden, this whole new world order is making sense. The erosion of constitutional values, the erosion of morality in this country, all of a sudden, it begins to make sense when we learn about mind control.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Wednesday, November 20, is it 26? Wow. 2025. We're going out of the matrix into prime reality. Thank you for joining us on X, Rumble, and YouTube in the live chat. Our wonderful moderator, Raymond, aka Two Steps Behind, is here. I see Ronnie is here. It's so good to see you. Sister Ronnie and brother Raymond, we love you guys. And of course, Christine, my wonderful wife, has the wise thumbs in a live chat. And I want to begin by saying something. If you're here, if you're seeing this, if you're watching this, you are affected by mind control, what we're going to talk about today. And we have on and off talked about this subject, but lately, and I really want to start this on a more personal note. I have, over the years, over the last 20 plus years, I've been in and out of researching mind control from the perspective of what has happened in these government and private programs. You know, how has it been concealed from the public? You know, how many people were affected by it? What exactly did they do and are they doing to people? And that is one avenue to look at it. And then, because of Christine's background in counseling and coaching and having, you know, a very deep education in trauma healing and, of course, you know, trauma responses of the mind and the subconscious mind, family constellation, and so forth, we have been observing society and doing it through a professional lens too for quite some time. And in the last few weeks and months, I have re-examined all the information, or I am re-examining all the information that I'm gathering, all the things that I'm researching. I'm re-examining everything and I'm putting it through that comparative lens. How does this compare against the information, or with the information that I know about MK Ultra, Mind Control, Project Monarch, and many other programs? And what has become so clear to me is that we are in a incredibly powerful loop, and that it was done in a very dark and calculated way. Dark from our perspective. What I mean by that is that even though these programs are ongoing, the bulk of the work was done when the first generations of ultra mind controlled people were put into levels of politics, of government, of entertainment, of media, of literature, of religion, when basically these mind controlled people that are actually programmed in a sophisticated way were distributed into these scenes, that everything started trickling down to everyone, you know, specifically education, such a big deal. So I'm literally, you know, in awe, because I'm discovering just how deep this has gone and just how pervasive it is. And you could never explain how 2020 went down and how all the subsequent things have gone down, from the COVID to the response to the shots in the arm and everything else. You can never explain this without mind control, and that it is all a result of severe control that we're under. And the reason why I said in the beginning, you are affected and I'm affected, we're all affected, is because as soon as we interact with society, with the world, with mass media, with entertainment, with politics, with social media, with screens, as soon as we interact, we're in it. We're bathing in it without realizing it. Everybody is. So is the truth community. So is the alternative media. So is everybody. It's just shocking how deep it goes, and that we need to acknowledge this, which is really the important factor here. So over the last days, I kept coming back in my memory to a speech that Cathy O'Brien, our dear friend Cathy O'Brien, gave in 1996 at the Granada Forum, when she was, really becoming sort of a household name when it comes to mind control, MK Ultra, Project Monarch, and so forth. And so what I would like to do is, out of that 1 hour speech or so, I comprised a segment of about 22 minutes, which I think contains some very important foundational information that is even more important today, seemingly, than it was back then, or even more timely. And I think it will give us the proper framework to re-examine everything we think we know, and even in the truth community, everything we think we do. So very timely, even though it's over 30 years ago, or 30 years ago, I should say. So let's watch this together, and please listen carefully. There's so much incredible information in this here.
Begin by defining mind control. I'd like to begin by defining mind control. I realized that my experience was extreme, that the extensive, total robotic, absolute mind control I endured is more limited than the kind of mind control that's proliferating in society. Mind control has kind of a sliding scale where you've got the total robotic mind control on one side, and you've got mind control that's proliferating, such as in occultism in this country, or Global Education 2000, where children are losing their freedom of thought and their ability to critically analyze. There's so many different aspects of society that are affected by mind control in varying degrees. It's imperative that this information get out. And as I explained, my victimization, it certainly can be applied to all different facets of mind control and mind manipulation. And as Mark and I have heard so many, many times from people who have read the book and heard us speak out, that this is a thread that's tying things together. All of a sudden, this whole new world order is making sense. The erosion of constitutional values, the erosion of morality in this country, all of a sudden, it begins to make sense when we learn about mind control. I was born in 1957 in Muskegon, Michigan, to a multi-generational incest-based family. This means my father was sexually abused as a child, my mother was sexually abused as a child, and they were sexually abusing me. I tell you this so that you can understand that my sexuality was confused in infancy. It was put into an area of my brain that's much like survival, like eating and drinking would be. The sexual abuse that I was enduring was so horrific that I developed dissociative identity disorder. There was no place for it in my mind to deal with such horror. Therefore, I developed a compartment in my brain, a little area behind amnesic barriers that was actually the neuron pathway shutting down in my brain in order to compartmentalize the memory of the abuse so that the rest of my mind could function normally as though nothing had happened. So if I'd see my father at the dinner table, I didn't remember sexual abuse. But as soon as he unzipped his pants, the part of me, that part in my brain that knew how to deal with that horrific abuse, the neuron pathways actually physically opened up so that that part of my mind could deal with my father again and again and again as needed. But I didn't have a full range of perceptions. I had a very limited perception, a very limited view. I developed another compartment to deal with the child pornography that my father was subjecting me to. He was earning his living as a worm digger on a 6th grade education and supplemented the family income with child pornography that was being distributed through the local Michigan mafia pornography ring. At that time, there's a criminal faction of our government that was interested in targeting children such as myself for mind control, because this compartmentalization of memory was something that they deemed ideal for keeping government secrets. After all, if I couldn't think to remember, how could I tell about it? Additionally, people who suffer from dissociative identity disorder develop a photographic memory behind those amnesic barriers, because the brain has a defense mechanism that when trauma occurs, it photographically records events surrounding trauma. So behind these amnesic barriers, I had a photographic memory, which the government deemed ideal for programming. That way I could deliver messages to and from government leaders, or in my case, also drug lords, who were involved in funding the black budget and funding the New World Order controls. It was just a tape recorder just parroting out exactly what I'd been told. Another aspect that the government was interested in is that as a dissociative identity disordered person, I had no concept of time, because I was going from compartment to compartment of my brain with no memory of what had happened before. Therefore, I had no ability to even keep track of time, and a concept of it was just absolutely impossible. And it also makes for, if I didn't know what I was doing earlier, I wouldn't know to be tired while I was overdoing something else. Therefore, a person who suffered from dissociative identity disorder had extensive physical endurance, just superhuman strength and an ability to keep going and going and going and going. Dissociative identity disorder persons also develop 44 times visual acuity. Very often that's why you see them wide-eyed with the whites around their eyes, because they're actually taking in more of their surroundings than the average person. At that time, because the government, this criminal faction of our government, was so interested in dissociative identity disordered persons, they knew that any child that was subjected to child pornography had to have endured trauma so horrible that they had to be suffering from that disorder. Therefore, this criminal faction of our government sanctioned this child pornography ring so that they could identify and target children such as myself for the project. At that time, the politician who was protecting this Michigan Mafia pornography ring was a guy named Gerald Ford. This is the same Gerald Ford that went on to become the first unelected president of the United States. Gerald Ford, I never perceived his political affluence. I only perceived him as another abuser like my father, because Gerald Ford also sexually abused me as a child and sexually abused me right on through my mind control victimization until Mark rescued my daughter Kelly and I in 1988. Gerald Ford is not a pedophile per se. He's what I refer to as trisexual. He'll try anything. Any age, anybody, anytime, anywhere, just as long as he had control. Because he had a perversion of power, in addition to his interest in mind control. Therefore, it was Gerald Ford who came out to our house and explained to my father how to raise me in the project according to government specifications. My father had been caught sending this child pornography through the U.S. mails, and therefore he was approached and told that if he sold me into that project, that he would gain immunity from prosecution. My father remains free from prosecution to date for so-called reasons of national security. Once my father agreed to sell me into the project, I was taken routinely to Mackinac Island, Michigan, which is a political retreat where the Michigan governor's mansion is located. It was a a bohemian grove of sorts where politicians met and discussed New World Order controls, where they discussed mind control of the masses, mind control in the school systems, how to use occultism as a trauma base. One of my sexual abusers at that time was the Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau is a professed Jesuit. Now, the Jesuits are an intelligence arm of the Catholic Vatican. There's a criminal faction within these Jesuits. I'm certainly not saying all Catholics are bad, nor am I saying all CIA is bad or all politicians. There's good and bad in everything. But nevertheless, Pierre Trudeau represented this criminal faction of the Catholic Church, of the Jesuits, who believed in mind control of the masses because they wanted to be the one world church in the New World Order. The money that was being brought in through the church was funding New World Order controls. And he firmly believed in mind control. Another sexual abuser of mine was then Michigan Senator and later U.S. Congressman Guy Vanderjagt. This is the same Guy Vanderjagt that went on to head the Republican National Committee that put George Bush into the office of president. It was at Mackinac Island, Michigan, when I was 13 years old, that I was dedicated to the senator who would become my owner in this mind control project. That's U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd. Senator Byrd is a Democrat from West Virginia. And again, as you'll notice as I reveal any names, that this doesn't have anything to do with party lines. Democrats and Republicans both are involved because it's not about party lines, it's about who's for the New World Order and who's not. Nevertheless, Senator Byrd had been in office as I've been alive. He's still in office today. He's been head of our Senate Appropriations Committee, which means he held the purse strings of our country. He decided where money would be spent. And I know from having witnessed and experienced and saw so much behind the scenes that Senator Byrd was appropriating money in directions that would allow for New World Order controls. Not only that, but my father, for having sold me into this project, was granted a lucrative military contract for making camshafts for military automobiles and all. My father became extremely wealthy on his 6th grade education. Senator Byrd, as my owner, would decide where I should go, when, what operations I would be forced to carry out during the Reagan-Bush administration, what places I should be taken specifically for mind control programming. Senator Byrd directed all of my activities. Also around that time, I'd made my first communion in Muskegon's St. Francis de Sales Church. Having made my first communion, I also endured an extra ritual after that was referred to as the rite to remain silent. That's R-I-T-E, as in ritual. This involved Congressman Vanderjagt and the head of our church at that time, a Father Don. And they subjected me to an occult blood ritual. This was so horrific. It was this reversal of the Catholic Mass. It confused my mind because when a person's operating on a subconscious level because they're so traumatized that consciously there's no place for what they're enduring, the subconscious mind has no ability to discern and to question and to reason the same way that the conscious mind does. And this reversal of the Catholic Mass into occultism just made it all seem to run together in my mind. It was absolutely horrific. This blood ritual was so horrible that my mind readily accepted the mind manipulation that I endured afterwards, a hypnotic language, the neuro-linguistic programming, mind-controlled programming, that actually changed the way that my brain was functioning, so that, you know, that part of my brain that I said would open up to deal with my father's abuse again and again? They changed that so that they decided when, where, and how that particular compartment of my brain would be opened and accessed. And they replaced the triggering mechanism with hypnotic codes, keys, and triggers, hand signals. There's also phone tones that can also open those neuron pathways and give access to the compartmentalized memory as well. They replaced that at that time. And this was with this right to remain silent. I also had a silence in my head after that, because up until that time, I heard, it was just my own voice, but I heard my voice arguing back and forth with all these different perceptions and from the different compartments in order that I could formulate some kind of a decision about things. I remember before the right to remain silent that I had some free thoughts of my own, and I had hoped for a place in the world where people didn't abuse each other. But with the right to remain silent, I lost my capacity, my ability for free will thinking. I lost my ability to even hope anymore. I lost all free will entirely. This right to remain silent silenced this argument that always went on in my head, and instead, all I ever heard from that point on was the voices of my abusers directing me, telling me exactly what it was I was supposed to do. I could only robotically follow those instructions and carry them out. By the time I was ready for high school, Senator Byrd ordered that I be sent to Muskegon Catholic Central High School. At that time, there was an enormous emergence of information. The Catholics had long since learned the effects of trauma on the human mind. The Crusaders had also recorded a great deal of information pertaining to trauma on the human mind. This information was being merged with the Hitler-Himmler research that the CIA had taken and had been advancing on. The combination of the merging of the information was very powerful. And Muskegon Catholic Central was a place where this information was being brought together. It was at Catholic Central that the very basis, the very groundwork for Global Education 2000 was being implemented. This is Goals 2000, outcome-based education. There's many different names for the program that's being implemented in our school systems. It's being forced on our children by the federal government. Global Education 2000 was designed to increase our children's learning capacity while decreasing their ability to critically analyze. That way they would just readily accept whatever they were told without any question and just take all the information in. At Catholic Central, I endured occult ritual in the school chapel, as did numerous other students in the school. I certainly wasn't the only one. As a matter of fact, by that time I really thought the whole world was involved in this kind of abuse. By then, my whole environment was saturated with it. It was while I was at Catholic Central that Gerald Ford went into the office of president. I had been conditioned by that time to believe that I had no place to run and no place to hide. This is a phrase that's used to lock in mind control victims of varying levels. There's no place to run, no place to hide. We're watching you. I truly felt locked in, which is exactly what they wanted for total control of my mind. After I graduated from high school, Senator Byrd ordered that I be transferred to Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville, Tennessee was heavily involved in mind control at that time through the country music industry, and above all, the proliferation of CIA cocaine operations within the country music industry were already in full swing. The political corruption in Tennessee was just all the way to the top. The country music industry provided a cover for mind-controlled slaves like myself to be taken around the country to the various places as designated, and also to distribute and deliver the large quantities of CIA cocaine that was coming into the country. It was my experience that the CIA's so-called war on drugs is no more than the CIA eliminating their competition as they take over the drug industry worldwide. They took their war on drugs to our street corners and turned our streets into a bloodbath. The country country music industry provided the cover for distributing the cocaine, so Senator Byrd wanted me to be within the country music industry. Besides that, he fancied himself an entertainer of sorts, and he fiddled on the Grand Ole Opry from time to time. When I was first sent to Nashville, he was playing on the Opry that night, and he had a musician behind him, a guy named Wayne Cox. Wayne Cox later told me that playing music behind Senator Byrd wasn't the only way that he backed him, but that he backed him politically as well. After the Opry that night, I endured an occult ritual again. Occultism is oftentimes used as a trauma base for mind control. Who can comprehend that kind of a trauma? A blood ritual is absolutely horrible, and it's a perfect trauma base for mind control, for the compartmentalization of memory. I witnessed Wayne Cox murder a railroad bum down at Nashville's Union Station. It was abandoned at that time, and there were bums around, and he shot him right between the eyes and cut off both of his hands, which was Cox's MO for murder. After this ritual, this horrible trauma, I was programmed that Wayne Cox would be my first handler. Around this same time, J. Bennett Johnston subjected me to some other mind manipulation that involved, instead of an occult theme, an alien theme. These guys who are manipulating my mind and programming me for mind control purposes claimed, and these criminals in control of our country as well, claimed to be gods, demons, and aliens, in order that I feel totally helpless, in order that I felt like they were beyond my realm to affect. And it certainly worked at that time. J. Bennett Johnston told me that he was an alien. He told me that he had been part of the Philadelphia experiment, and when the ship disappeared, it came back a spaceship. This is in keeping with kind of an air-water mirror theme that NASA uses quite frequently, a reversal, because, again, the subconscious mind doesn't have any reasoning capacity. J. Bennett Johnston then showed me, through his office at General Dynamics, a then top secret stealth. Here was this triangular stealth that wasn't in any of the school books, wasn't being talked about anywhere, wasn't out in the newspapers or anything else. It was being withheld. It was still a top secret weapon system. But I saw this triangular stealth. It looked like a spaceship to me. I'd never seen anything like that. And everything that J. Bennett Johnston was doing and he was involved in certainly was alien to me. So it was easy for me to accept the idea that what was happening was in fact being perpetrated by aliens. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as aliens. That would be foolish. But what I am saying is that it was my experience that these were people claiming to be aliens. If there's a reality out there pertaining to any alien influence, we need to sort out the government misinformation and disinformation and mind manipulation techniques that they're using. I know for a fact that the plan is to make all of us feel totally helpless, that what's happening is beyond our realm to affect because we've been taken over by aliens, that our Independence Day is dawning. So beware of that. Understand that those criminals have been keeping information and technology from us under their blanket of national security. They are 25 years ahead of us at least technologically. They're way ahead. So when they say, it's aliens, and they show us some incredible technology, don't fall into the trap of feeling totally helpless, that this is beyond our realm to affect. Superstition begins where knowledge leaves off. And they have been keeping knowledge from us for a long time. People have all kinds of belief systems. And I'm sure each and every one of you has various and different belief systems as well. Regardless of what your belief system is, it is imperative that you know that these criminals are people. They are within our realm to affect. They need to be held accountable for their actions and their crimes against humanity. It was 80, and my daughter Kelly was born. She was born directly into the MK Ultra Mind Control Project on a much higher level, a more sophisticated technological level than I was subjected to. In addition to trauma, she was subjected to harmonic mind control programming on NASA installations literally since birth, before her brain even had a chance to form.
All righty. Well, this is the 22 minutes or so of a longer speech, and we put the link to the full speech in the video description. You can also see, I believe in that video, Mark Phillips, her deceased husband, who back in '88 rescued her and her daughter Kelly out of the program and helped her deprogram and put all the pieces together. The reason why I keep coming back to Cathy is because her testimony, and we've done interviews with her and met with her in person, and have become friends. Cathy's testimony stands the test of time, as truth always does. It stands the test of time. It becomes only truer, at least in our ability to perceive it and verify it, as time goes on. And there's a few things that she said in there that really stood out that I wanted to quickly touch on. One was that mind control, MK Ultra, and all the associated programs, usually when people hear about it, they think, oh, I wasn't part of that. I wasn't brought up like that. It's sad for those people, but it doesn't affect me. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Mind control works on a sliding scale, like she said, and some people are directly put there. But if you use logic and reasoning, if you look at what has happened to the entertainment industry, for example, let's just look at music and films and series, TV shows. They have gone from, we had a good variety of TV shows and series, let's say in the 80s and 90s still. And there was some drama, there was some action, there was, some wholesome. It's all gone down a drama road. It's all gone down more, violence, darkness, horror. And if you think about when these programs were institutionalized, I want to say they really started to be institutionalized around World War II and after World War II. There was before for sure, but really, like, on an industrial scale, if you think about it, that then a generation or two later, these folks were in positions where they were writing these things, producing these things, and influencing. And so, like I said earlier, this has trickled down into every layer of every aspect of society. And the sliding scale simply means you might not be on the direct end where you were literally directly affected by the programming, but you are affected by the programming of those who were programmed and their actions and what they put out. And so we're now in a full circle society where we are basically MK Ultraing each other because of our own program and the sliding scale. And that the moral and societal decay is not just a sort of a sign of the times, but is a needed effect that the mind control needed to produce in people. Because when the moral decay is at an all-time low, you have division amongst societies and families. Everybody fights with each other. Everybody's very egotistical and self-centered. And those are the people who are easiest manipulated. I just made some notes here where I was listening to her. Then the compartmentalization that trauma produces, it compartmentalizes different aspects of our mind. And the interesting part is that we recently discovered, you and other people, and we talked about this on the air, in recent years, we've discovered a very strange, different sensation of the passage of time, where we subjectively experience time to move faster. And we have talked about all the possible explanations, but really not as much about the mind control, which makes so much sense. Let's just say that what Cathy described in an extreme sense, her compartmentalization, is happening to us too on a smaller scale, but we still wouldn't have the same linear, usual experience of time, it would be compartmentalized and it could feel completely different. So our current experience of time, many of us, could also be partially at least a product of mind control. um, then you have the trauma programming that we are now exposed to on such a larger scale than even in Cathy O'Brien's day. That was in the 90s and 80s, where the internet and social media and smartphones and smart devices weren't around yet. So we are now, and what I mean by that is every traumatic event that you witness, whether you were there in person or you witness on the screen, as soon as you have a triggered emotional response to it because it shocks you, there is at least a micro trauma that happens. So now it's edged into your brain. It isn't just the image that's edged into your brain. The images of what we saw during the COVID era, what we saw during the shots era, what we see with the big fires that are, Hawaii and other stuff and earthquakes and stuff like that. That's edged into our mind, but then attached to that is an emotion, and that emotion is usually shock, fear, horror, whatever. So every time that new programming needs to happen, all they need to do is remind us of that day, remind us of that event like 9/11 and JFK and all these things. And our mind goes back into that state, that moment that you first experienced it, and you are literally opening up a different compartment in your mind that is easily susceptible. So this is now happening on a daily or virtually daily scale versus before, when there was just TV, and then before that it was just radio. But really, before radio, that was happening much less because people simply weren't exposed to that kind of information overload. Then, of course, the advent of how language is being used. The English language per se is a spell casting language. It was designed that way, other languages as well, but the English language is literally a spell casting language. And we've sort of analyzed that quite a few times in different shows. But there are specific ways to speak and use language, like, for example, in NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and other that can be used positively, but of course can be used very negatively. If you go back and look at the COVID media coverage, that was NLP on steroids. It was the closest that you can ever see to worldwide MK Ultra deployed, in language, in visuals, in the sounds that we were hearing and everything. It was a full on MK Ultra project, and it succeeded like on a big scale. um, the loss of free will is also something that we don't realize. When we are so compartmentalized and traumatized, we really lose our free will because we don't have access to creative and critical thinking any longer. Of course, we're all aware how this has entered into the education system, and that a standardized education system was always only about mind control and controlling what kind of people are being raised. It's often attributed to the industrial age and how workers were needed for this big revolution of the industrial age. They needed a specific kind of person that could follow orders and learn things, but not question those things. So that was sort of the lemming approach, and our school system is still fundamentally based on it, but of course much more sophisticated. Now, Cathy herself, under mind control, was basically, she, part of her job as a mind control slave was to deliver messages and help facilitate things. So she would deliver messages between politicians and whatnot, and part of that was the complete revamping of the education system, of the global 2000 agenda, no child left behind, all of that. We are now perhaps taking one small step by having closed down the Department of Education in the United States. Whether that will in effect defederalize education or not, we will see, but it's a good step. I mean, that is one huge pipeline of institutionalized mind control. Whether it will be better under the states, guys, I don't know, but it's just something to look into. And then we get into this big theme that's coming up now, and why I really thought of Cathy's speech here is the alien theme, which I have heard over the years many times. Beware, when you put the puzzle pieces together, the whole alien story looks very, very different than even the truther circles want to admit. And the UFO and alien community is such a passionate one. You know, it's such a passionate subject, and people have been in it for many years and decades. And so I don't want to put it like Greg Braden puts it so beautifully. I don't want to make anyone wrong. This is not about that. But let's think about all the channelings, all the abductions, all the sightings. When did that really start? When did the documentation start? Since when has it become more and more and more? You know, do we have at least a shred of that kind of sightings and experiences before the 40s, right? You know, the 20th century was very well documented. So do we have the same kind of exposure? You know, did people have as many UFO sightings before the 40s? Did they have as many channelings, other kind of interactions, visions, abductions? And when you go and dig deep, you'll find some of that, but you'll find very, very, very little compared to what's happened since the 1940s. So in my and like Cathy, I don't say that other beings don't exist, because clearly they do, and they're documented in much older art and books and whatnot. But I believe that since the 40s, this has been a huge deception to hijack this alien theme and the UFO theme and to put it into a certain context, like we've discussed in our previous show, which is part of the MK Ultra mind control New World Order program, which, you know, it blows your mind when you think about how extensive it is. But you know, it could be that 97, 98% of the channelings aren't channelings at all, but are actually implanted. And, you know, it, as someone who has communicated beyond the veil of the visible many times, I have sharpened this skill over now 15 years together with Christine, which means that we've literally studied this field extensively. I have never done it publicly before. I was 100% certain that my biases or any kind of manipulation, I could exclude that. It's a very, very, it's a real field. Channelings, or I don't even like the word, but communication beyond what we can see and hear with our eyes and ears is absolutely not only possible, but actually very natural. But the interference is massive. And this is what I noticed at the very beginning. That's why I became cautious. That's why I studied. That's why I trained. That's why I knew that if I wasn't completely clean and clear, there was a huge potential for interference. And I'm looking now at the exploding scene of channelers who are channeling the Galactic Federation and the Ashtar Command and God knows who. And I see those people. I see a bunch of traumatized folks, like many of them heavily traumatized, never healed. And all my red flags go up, because I know when somebody is traumatized, the last thing they should do is freaking try to channel anything other than healing. And so and so this entire field, or the vast majority of it, I dismiss it at hand, because I know how it works and how it doesn't work. All that to say that we are the last words, or one of the last things that Cathy always says in any interview, Cathy O'Brien, is the importance of knowledge. She says we fill in the blanks with superstition or other kind of beliefs when we don't have the knowledge, but we can have the knowledge. And the enemy, if you will, has made it so that we deem the enemy to be supernatural, bigger, larger than life, capable of so much more. And perhaps we need to realize that that was part of our programming, and how sophisticated, how great the plan was to make us believe they're so big and we're so small. um I do think that if we really, and this is what Christine and I have been saying for years now, if we really want to unlock our potential, healing needs to be at the forefront, deprogramming and healing. And only, you know, as I dive deep into this whole MK Ultra stuff again, and I'm looking at things from a different perspective now. It's so much, even so much bigger than we realized. It's so much more sophisticated, but sophistication and cleverness and smartness are operating in one arena, and that arena is they're really good at that. We're operating in a broader awareness spirit arena that part can't touch when that is fully activated. So in other words, any and all information that we consume, we have to assume that it's gone through some kind of manipulation, pure invention, but is in some way, shape, or form connected to mind control. So the only way to be sure is to become an excellent receiver again. We're receivers so often of information, but when the receiver is tainted, then the receiver gives a distorted version of what it receives, much like when your radio dial isn't exactly on the number that the station's on, you don't get a clear transmission, you get a distorted one. And then the information isn't accurate any longer. You hear words that are distorted, you hear sounds that are distorted. And it's much the same with us. When we're in bad shape, physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, all the information that we receive is distorted because the receiver isn't healthy, isn't whole, isn't healed. Um, and boy, I mean, I'm literally, for those of you who are parents who have young children, I mean, if you pull your children away from all pop culture, you will not have done them even the slightest disfavor. If you pull them away from all mainstream education, you will have done them a huge favor. If you pull them away from all the crap that's on social media and in the child education world, 99.9% is mind control and has no value. So that all to say that when people today consider, bringing their children up in what others would deem to be isolated, I would say that's a very wise decision. I think you should be very, very careful about who you allow your children to associate with. For example, when they visit with friends, I mean, we were very kind of hands-on. Who are these families? What are their beliefs? What do they, and oftentimes, it's not what you want for your children, especially when they're very young and don't have an ability to discern yet, quite yet. So all of this is my invitation to all of us, including myself, to revisit both how the mind control works and operates, and there's a lot of literature out there. There is a lot of great books, and Cathy has written some. She just came out with a new book, and we're going to have her on, which I look forward to. But there's a lot of good material. And then also, please, everyone, absolutely everyone, please consider the healing of your conscious or unconsciously held traumas. We all have them, again, on a sliding scale, but we all have them. And healing is literally the only way that we can become a clear receiver and creator again. There's no other way. Yeah, so I'll be on this. There'll be more that we will show about this. There will be more of the techniques that we will uncover and revisit together, because we can compare them to real life events that are happening right now. We can compare them and find them in the real life psychological operations that are out there. And knowledge is, and especially applied knowledge, is your best armament. It's your best shield. It's your best weapon, because the things that you are aware of, you can control. You can, when you are aware that something is happening, you can say no, you can protect yourself against it, you can walk away from it, or you can say yes to it. But where there is no awareness, you are at the mercy of whatever is beaming at you because you're not aware what's happening. And so awareness is the number one key, and a radical approach with yourself and the truth. This would one of our members here, Thomas, he's also in a locals community. That is his theme. That's the theme of his life, and that's what he keeps reminding people of. And I appreciate that so much. That truth, people think that love is the highest vibration, and it really isn't. There's authenticity, there's bliss, there's truth. Truth is everything. And wherever we hide from it, wherever we try to push it away, wherever we don't acknowledge it, we just repeat more of the same, and it gets worse with time. So truth needs to be, something that we are ruthless with ourselves with. In other words, it's the one thing that where you don't baby yourself. You look at the truth, whatever it might be, and then you move on to the healing phase. And if and when we do that, our lives individually become incredibly much better, beautiful, and we can shift things collectively. But more than ever, I'm convinced that unless we address this mind control issue and just how pervasive it is, we're fighting an uphill battle. And now is not the time for that. We really need to get to the bottom of everything. All right, friends, thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us. For those of us who are with us in the locals community, after I close the show here, we're going to get up and go check on our baby goats. We got little kids in the barn. It's getting colder today, so we're going to fix up the barn, make sure that there's no drafts there, so the little ones are warm for the next few days, and we're getting some more hay. And it's sometimes it's kind of almost a little surreal, the big contrast of what we're doing here, and then I'll be Farmer John for the rest of the afternoon, and it's beautiful too. But if you want to follow along, we'd love to have you over in our locals community. It's where we share the farm tales, where we do coffee and truth shows, and the Honey Talks, which is the show that Christine and I do together. And it's just a more private, more intimate community. And I think sometimes we go even deeper on many subjects. All right, my friends, thank you for tuning in. We love you, we appreciate you, and we'll be back with you again very, very soon. Christine and I would love to invite you into something really special. We started a new show on locals called Farm Tales, where we share the real stories from our homestead, the animals, the garden, the beauty, and even the funny mishaps along the way. Just like all of our work, it's about living consciously in harmony with nature and creating a life of true freedom. Please click the link down below and join us for Farm Tales on Locals. We would love to see you there.